Hi, welcome to God Stories today. My name's Chris Thompson. You guys coming? Hello, I'm Chris Thompson. This is God Stories Today. This is my first interview, and Laura is my first interviewee. Just give you a thumbs up there. There we go. I have no idea what I'm doing. I really have no idea what I'm doing.
That's two of us.
Brilliant. All I know is that I've been in ministry for 20 years, and in the Church of England. And one of the things, if not the primary thing that I've enjoyed the most, is when I've gone and visited people, they've come to me, or we've been doing a project or a conference together, and then that moment comes when they tell you your God story or their God story. And some of the stories I've heard over the years have been absolutely enthralling, and you kind of think, someone needs to make a movie out of these sometimes because they're that epic, you know, and it's often the times that, you know, no one knows the individual that I'm talking to, and yet God has done astonishing things through them, sometimes quietly, but they are astonishing. And I thought to myself often, gosh, someone needs to record these. Anyway, about 9 months ago, I was walking up the stairs in this place, and I heard God's still small voice say to me, record people's stories. £10,000 later, don't tell the wife, right? £10,000 later, here I am. And I still haven't quite got all the equipment, because I've got a dodgy camera on me. The viewers will be quite grateful because that, and you've got the broadcast quality camera on you, so dodgy camera, good camera, dodgy camera, good camera. But here I am, YouTube channel up and running, and we're going to give it a go, basically.
Fab.
I am learning on the job though. Okay, so please bear with me. I've got this terrible fear that I haven't pressed record on one of the things, or the sound is not working, and like an hour later we've had the most incredible conversation, and no one's ever going to hear it.
No one knows.
But I can see a red light on that bad boy, and I can see a red light on that bad boy,
Yep.
and it looks like the sound is working to me. Here we go. As I said to you earlier on, but I'll say now for the viewer's benefit, I'm very interested not only in a person's God story, and in particular those who don't have a high profile, because I feel that God's calling me to record what he's doing in like the Marys of the world that were literally just getting on with their lives, as it were, from morning, noon and night, and then they just are what God wants, because often they're the people who are willing to say yes to God. So I'm interested in that, but equally I'm interested in the sacred everyday, in a person's everyday life. For some reason that fascinates me. So there will be some like establishing questions, because you know people don't know who you are, and then obviously we get into the core bit of your God story. And then maybe, if you're willing, some theological questions.
We can try.
Because what you will learn is that Laura is a trainee vicar from Cornwall, which is great. Woo! Big up the southwest of England. And at the end, we'll have like some fun questions, because I personally find them interesting and fun. You know, quick fire ones, as it were.
Okay.
So I think we're there. So let's start.
Let's try.
Where were you born?
I was born in Peterborough in Cambridgeshire, and I was. My parents were in the Royal Air Force, and my dad was serving at RAF Scampton at the time.
Wow. So you had the forces all around you as you were growing up?
Yeah, literally. I was used to sleep under the flight path of the Vulcan bomber.
Everyone's done that.
Yeah,
Can
absolutely.
I ask, why did you sleep under the flight path of the Vulcan
Because
bomber?
that was the aircraft at the station we were at.
Oh,
So.
okay. Just thought it was a thing.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
No, that was the noise that sent me to sleep. So.
And when you were growing up, did you enjoy school?
I changed school many times in my primary school, so there was a lot of kind of chopping and changing with Dad's postings and all those sorts of things. But overall, yes, absolutely. And actually, changing school probably gave me some level of resilience in sort of dealing with change and all those sorts of things that you don't recognise as a child, but later on you do. And overall, it was quite a happy experience, yeah.
Lovely, jubbly. Just pause. I've just noticed that your mic is being covered by
is it
your
covered
scarf.
now?
Just poke it through.
Push it. Better. There, we'll go for that.
And scene.
Back in the room.
And scene. Okay, so it's interesting because my father was in the forces as well, so I know what it is to be, pushed around and from pillar to post and house to house, and always being a new person at school, so I resonate with that. What was your favourite subject?
Drama.
Okay, lots to explore there, but we won't.
Followed by history.
What were you like as a child?
Probably, I was an only child,
Mm-hmm.
so I think always happier in the company of adults because that's what I was used to. And I had a pony, and I was very happy spending time with my pony and my mum. I had a pony.
That's
I had
awesome.
a pony. It is awesome. Incredible hard work and responsibility as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was great fun. And that was kind of, horses were my life. My pony was my life for my kind of teenage years,
Right.
I suppose. I think I was probably a fairly serious child at times.
Oh, okay.
But I think that goes with the territory, really. So.
Just touching, if I may, because these are meant to be quick fire, but you said you like drama, and I want to pursue that. What was it about drama that stirred you to like it so much?
Yeah,
What does that say about you?
I loved it. I loved the affirmation of performing, without doubt. That's so egotistical but true. I loved just inhabiting those roles. And I was blessed with a drama teacher, David Calder, who was and is an amazing teacher and gifted in what he did. And I had two main things that we did through school. One was The House of Bernard Alba by Frederica Garcia Lorca.
Oh, that one!
Which is incredibly dark for 16-year-olds.
Okay,
It was incredibly a challenging role. I was Bernarda Alba, but it was just an incredible night, and I realised then that I could stand up and talk in front of other people. And I also was lucky enough to be given the position of stage manager for Noah's Ark for the first and second year's production, and it was chaos. And it was brilliant. I was shepherding people around all the time. And when I left school, in my leaving book, Mr. Calder wrote that he hoped that I, at some point, would use my skills in my life. And at the time, I thought he meant maybe teaching or something of that. And then I was suddenly reminded of that about 3 years ago when I was heading for BAP.
Oh, really?
And suddenly thought...
That's a Bishop's Advisory Panel, by the way.
Bishop's Advisory Panel,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's what you do when you feel called to be a priest. It's like a 3-day sort of assessment at the end of a long discernment process.
Big part of the selection. And I suddenly remembered that, he'd kind of spotted this in me, and just suddenly things clicked, and kind of actually was that God saying, I'm going to give you a bit of a gift for talking.
It's actually listening to you now. We Laura and I bumped into each other for the last year or so.
Yeah.
Because Laura is training, and maybe you can say some more about this later on, at St. Melita's College in the southwest. So, because my wife is the director there, we bump into each other a lot because I put the chairs out.
Yes, very well. Very straight lines.
Absolutely. But sitting and talking to you now properly, the tonality of your voice, you could be on BBC Radio. You really could. You've got like a velvety sort of like sound to your voice. Watch out, BBC Radio. So that's interesting, because it naturally moves us into the notion of talking about God then, because you said 3 years ago, God brought that back to your mind, and now it's interconnected, that early history. Did you, at that point, growing up, make any connections to God at that point when you were studying drama? And feeling who you were inside?
Not hugely. Actually, one of my... and this is hilarious for me now, is one of my abiding memories of the play, the Bernarda Alba, was that there was a section in the play where we pray, and it's supposed to be done in a sort of chant form, a little bit like we might do matins or evensong. And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't hit the note and couldn't do it. And so I was saying the lines, and the antiphonal response, which I now know it's called, by the chorus, they sang. And that strikes me as hilarious now, because I'm just as bad with evensong as I was in that play at 16.
Bless, but it wasn't sort of like, it was there, but it wasn't really the biggest spiritual experience. It's something that's blossomed and you now connect it back.
Yeah, completely. It's all in retrospect. It's all on the reflection.
Right.
And it's just fascinating to kind of think that even then I would occasionally feel that a God presence. and that God would take me through. But I have to say that I kind of never knew what to do with that.
Okay.
And that particularly, when I was 16, my father was diagnosed with bowel cancer.
Oh.
And the night he was diagnosed, I remember going down to the hospital chaplaincy, just feeling this need to be with someone and for God to be involved. And when I got there, the chaplaincy was in darkness and everything was locked up.
Oh dear.
And I think subconsciously I almost took that as a cue of God wasn't interested.
Okay.
And that was kind of from there on in, that kind of turned me away for quite some time.
Really? Was come back to that in a moment. Were there any moments before that? Because you mentioned you were 16 at the time. Were there any moments before that? Maybe any God moments? Even if you can now say they're God moments, but at the time they weren't. Or can you ever remember praying as a child?
Yeah, I went to one of my primary schools was a Church of England primary school,
right.
And I certainly remember us praying in assembly and visiting clergy and those sorts of things, and kind of. The best way I can describe it is not feeling disturbed by it, just sort of feeling this was okay, rather than anti.
I love that, not being disturbed by it. That's hilarious. I have a sucker tea for that. We're both vicars, by the way. That's what we do. Drink tea.
It's in the job description. Right?
Absolutely. Oh, bless.
Brilliant. So I can't say there were many God moments growing up, but. Looking back, there were occasions. I remember having very Christian neighbours who went to church every Sunday, which as a family we thought was a bit odd, I'll be honest. You know, like, Sundays are lions, right?
Coffees, go out.
Read the paper. But I remember watching them go off, and a strange sense of longing.
Okay.
A strange sense of, actually I'd quite like to go with them and find out what this is about, and you know, what's going on there. I was probably about 10 at the time. But never really kind of have carried that, picked it up or carried on with it.
So there was the odd, subtle, but now we look back on it, powerful moment, perhaps we could describe it as us, in your childhood where you either saw something which made you think of God, like you've just described, and there was a longing as you saw this Christian family going off and kind of thought, okay, what is it that's getting them up in the morning on a Sunday so that they can go and worship God? What is that? And equally there was the moment, bless you, at 16 when this tragic news, came upon you, and you sought God, but the chaplaincy was closed, and you thought, okay, boom. Powerful experience, sadly a bit of a negative one, but God turns all things into good. Okay.
Yeah, I now know never to close a church.
Yeah. Interesting. So with all that in mind then, you would describe yourself as not being a cradle Christian?
Oh, definitely. I think I would say we were cultural Christians in the sense of, I certainly remember Mum filling in consent forms at school and putting C of E, and me saying, what does that mean?
It's almost akin to being sort of like English, isn't it? You know
yes,
what I mean?
we're English, therefore we're C of E.
Yeah, absolutely.
And certainly I was baptised as a child, at RAF Scampton, I was baptised sort of, 6 months old. So as a family, that's what happened. Marriages happened in church. Babies were baptised or christened, and that's just what happened. That's how it went on. I remember occasional Christmas carol services, Remembrance Sunday maybe, but it was those events. So yeah, I think it's cultural Christian, and that's not to say that that's a bad thing. I think that's okay. I think that's the majority of people in this country would perhaps identify with what I've just experienced. What I explained that I experienced as a child. So. Yeah, I think that's where it goes. It's making that leap from cultural Christian to committed Christian.
I think sometimes the cultural Christian thing, rather than it being always described as negative, I think it can possibly be described as a good starting point.
Totally.
It's because you're not blanked off from it. It's just a really, really good starting point. It's good fodder, as it were, for God to be able to use.
And as a potential priest, that's for me where it also speaks about when you are baptising or you're doing someone's wedding, is you may not see them every Sunday. You may never see them again, but you don't know what start you've given someone.
God's mark is upon them.
Completely.
So, that's your childhood. When did it become real for you? When did it go from being cultural to really, really active and part of who you are?
Dun dun dun!
Sup a tea for that one, I think.
Definitely, this needs celebrating.
I'm going to just point out, these are not for show, okay? If you really want to sort of... The idea is that I think God said, I want it to be like a breakfast table sort of discussion sort of thing. And this looks very studio-like, it really does. So I kind of am trying.
No, Chris, I was expecting you for a bacon butty, not a shock of hands.
Now I feel really bad. I should have done it. I'll ring upstairs.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Staff.
Sorry, I'm interrupted.
No, not at all. You food. That's not an interruption.
That's a good point. Talk amongst yourselves for a while.
What was the question?
When did it move from being cultural to being part of who you are?
Yeah. I had my own children, and we wanted to get them baptised, because that's what we did. We were cultural Christians, right? They needed baptised. And we waited until our second child was born, because we kind of thought we'd do, 2 for 1 kind of offer with the church.
Stack and rack.
Yeah, exactly. One buffet. That's what I was thinking. It was great. And so we started to get that arranged, and my husband and I, George and I, have been involved with the Royal Air Force Air Cadets for a number of years, and we didn't really know the priests where we lived, but the Air Cadets are amazing at having this chaplaincy service, which you know about.
Can I just mention?
Yeah, please do.
Big up 450 Squadron, Kenny Air Cadets, Padre, yes, a massively brilliant organisation. Sorry, Karen.
Yeah, essentially, like 44,000 young people. It's incredible. So our experience of godly people at that time were our chaplains through the Air Cadets. And our wing chaplain, Brian Anderson, was our kind of focal point for anything godly at that moment. So never underestimate those chaplaincy roles, because I think Brian has probably done more weddings, baptisms and funerals for ATC staff than anyone else. It's just incredible. So he happened to live in our town, and so we just turned to him and said, we want the children done. What do we do?
Did Tom come for us?
Literally, because we just really didn't know about this stuff, but we knew we wanted it done. So we started that process of arranging that with him. And he was brilliant, and the local priest was incredibly gracious to let him do that, because actually Brian had retired at that point, so I had permission to officiate. But obviously it required good grace from the local team, which was wonderful. And so we started arranging that in the autumn of 2012, and that was all kind of ticking along nicely. We had a date, February the 17th, they were going to be dunked, all was well. And we'd had a pretty rough year as a family. We'd had a pretty rough couple of years, actually. In the space of 3 months, I had suffered an ectopic pregnancy, which had burst, so it was kind of absolutely life-threatening. The month after that, our daughter, who was 3 at the time, Izzy, had broken her leg, which, in the grand scheme of things, relatively minor, but when you have a tiny child with a broken leg, that's, it feels huge. Yeah. And then the following month, my husband unexpectedly lost his job. In just such a kind of dramatic way. It was a redundancy, it was as the recession was hitting everybody, and he worked for a large American company and was literally called in and said, thanks but no thanks. Thanks for your 7 or 8 years, but actually, this happens. Yeah, so then we went through...
It must have been all over the shop.
Yeah, as a family, I think we were very positive. One of the first things that George did with his redundancy money was to enrol in an MBA program. So we tried to remain positive, and he took on some contract work, and that was great. And then I got pregnant with Seb, and George was in contract work, all was looking well. And when Seb was 12 days old, George had his contract notice terminated. The contract had come to an end. And he kind of, okay, now remember, I'm not a committed Christian at this point, but it is a moment of, God, please help us, because we don't know where this is going. And we were a month before Christmas, where the contract was ending, and are we going to keep the house? How are we going to feed the children? All of that. I'm on maternity leave, obviously. You can imagine the kind of the strain going through us. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, George receives a full-time job offer.
Wow.
In an industry that he's familiar with, in a role that he's familiar with. Right. A little bit of a commute, so not overly convenient, but it's a full-time job with a proper salary and a full contract. This wasn't a temporary role like his previous one. So there was, there would be no unexpected kind of endings. And we got to that Christmas just a couple of weeks later, and I think we're just feeling relieved at that point. And Christmas Eve, we all go to bed about 9 o'clock. I'm shattered. The kids are excited. Izzy's excited. Seb's 6 weeks old. He doesn't really know what's going on.
Are you still living in the southwest?
Still, we're all in Cornwall, but not yet because we've been in Cornwall our whole married lives.
So it's 9 o'clock, Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve in Saltash, and everyone's in bed. Great. Bing. 11:10, I wake up. I'm like, what am I doing awake? And I suddenly thought, I'm going to church. I'm going to midnight mass. just like that. So I look at my sleeping baby. I look at my snoring husband.
Where's George?
He knows. My daughter's sound asleep in her own bed, which is a thing in itself, quite frankly, at this point. And I thought, I'm going to check. So I get up, I grab my clothes, I creep down the stairs, get dressed, take my car keys, and go.
No one knew you were doing it?
Nobody knew I was going at this point.
Just you and God.
I sent my mum a text because I was like, if I get murdered on the way. And I just
pragmatic. I like it.
Always thinking. And I get to the local church, St Stephen's, and I sit outside. I'm going in. And I'm a bit terrified because the thing that's always put me off church is how do you know when to sit, how do you know when to stand, and how do you not look like an idiot when you sit and everyone else stands. You know, it's a big part of going to church. So I walk in, sit down, work out what I'm supposed to do, follow everyone else. The vicar, Alan Butler, gave a mildly, amusing kind of midnight mass sermon. I thought that's quite jolly. They went up for communion. I was invited, but didn't. I regretted it instantly.
Why?
Even though I wasn't confirmed, I regretted not going up to that rail.
There was something in your heart that said, I should have done that.
Yeah, totally. Like afterwards, I was like, I should have gone. Really set a sense of regret. I still hold that today, actually. That I should have gone. Go to leave. Realise I recognise one of the priests because she's our local RAF Air Cadet chaplain.
Right.
I thought, I know who that is. Go home. Luckily, nobody's woken up because George couldn't have dealt with Seb if he needed a feed.
Right, yeah. He's good, but it's not that good.
It's not that good, exactly. Get back into bed. Job done.
Total covert, RAF covert operation. And so you're back in bed and you wake up the next day, Christmas Day.
We celebrate Christmas.
Wow.
As we do, big, presents and meals and, a bit of a nod to God, and that's about it, really.
Did you not sort of think, what was that?
Well, it was just like, that was a nice experience.
Okay.
That's literally how it went. We had, go through that year, we had the children baptised in the February. We took them to Messy Church, which was an interesting experience for the family. We started going to the family service once a month, which was okay. And then we got to the May, and Lee Rigby was murdered at Woolwich Barracks.
Oh, yes.
And that was that Sunday morning. I looked at my husband and said, I know it's not a family service, but I really feel the need for us to go to church today. And I'll give George his due. He said, all right. Now, the reason I say that... Well done, George. The reason I say that is we had 50 people coming for a barbecue lunch that afternoon.
Oh, wow.
And I said to George, at 10 o'clock we're going to church. Never mind all the prep, we're going to church. And we did. And we started going more regularly on Sundays from that point.
Okay.
And that kind of unfolded the story for us. We started searching for a bit more, and it just so happened, the one and only time that I've known the church do it recently, is they ran an Alpha course. And we were able to take part in that Alpha course.
Big fan of Alpha.
Completely. For us, it just gave us a chance to learn about this thing that we were entering into, this faith. And I developed some friendships. And in the meantime, I had developed a friendship with another mum at Messy Church, who I said to her one day, I don't really know all the stories, but I read them in the children's Bible. And she laughed at me and she said, that's okay, so do I. And I said, all right, great. She said, but I'm in holy orders. I realised this wonderful woman they had just moved to the area. Her husband was the Baptist minister, and she was an Anglican priest. Hi, Michelle and Tim.
Hi, Michelle and Tim.
And so we had this kind of Christian friendship building as well, based on our children actually, and the Messy Church, and just recognising we had lots in common. And so that was it. Sort of over that time it developed. and then by 2015 I felt that I wanted more. So I approached our curate and said that I thought I was ready for confirmation. I thought this is what God was asking. Confirmation was next. And duly, I went through the confirmation classes and was confirmed. An amazing moment when the bishop puts out his hand, that warmth that just goes through you as he calls down the Spirit. Just an incredible moment. And I kind of sat back a bit satisfied at that point. I went, there you go, God, done that. What else you could ask me to do? That's it, I'm sorted. Because Christmas Eve 2015.
So a year later.
3 years later.
3 years later?
3 years later. So we've gone from Christmas Eve 2012 for the first time in church to Christmas Eve 2015.
Okay.
And it's become a special service for me by this point.
I'm sure.
You know, and I for the second year I did the reading, and that was a wonderful feeling to be able to do that and be part of the service. And a friend came with me from the service. Christmas Eve is actually her birthday, so she doesn't normally make it to the service, but I said, I'll pick you up on the way. And so she sat beside me. Wendy was sat with me just kind of through the service. And I do my reading, and that's wonderful. It's great. It's perfect. I love the whole atmosphere in the church at that moment. You really feel God in that moment. And I sat down kind of going, there you go, God, did that one. This is great. And the Eucharistic prayer starts. And there is a misprint in the words as the priest is reading them. And instead of saying bread of life, it reads cup of salvation at the wrong point.
Okay.
They had flipped, that's all. And just to be clear, it wasn't the priest's fault. It was a misprint. And at that moment, I'm sat in that pew, fully engaged in the Eucharist, and this heavy presence just falls on my shoulders. And I feel like I'm choking because there's one word on my tongue and it's buzzing around my head. And there's one word. What is it? Ordination.
So before that moment, you hadn't really contemplated. Confirmation was the pinnacle of it.
Yeah, that was like, hooray!
Yeah, and before that moment, you hadn't even thought about the notion of you being called to be a priest in the Church of England.
Oh, that was hilarious! I actually remember at Alpha, someone saying about Rev Laura, and I went, I don't think so.
I had a similar experience actually. So I'm a South Londoner, you know what I mean? It's like, me a priest? Hang on, I grew up on the streets of South London. So literally, you say it was a heavy presence. Describe that more. Like
a weight, and actually, like somebody's got you by the shoulders, and they're pushing you down on the shoulders.
Wow.
And then the choking sensation in my throat, because I could feel this word, and then like a helicopter buzzing around my head, and my heart rate elevated just beyond at that moment. And I wear a Fitbit heart rate tracker, and you can see my heart rate on that tracker spike.
I've got the picture.
You'll
hopefully see it.
And there is no other explanation that at that moment it's because my heart, what was happening to me.
Yeah.
So I'm sat in a pew. I'm not running. I'm not jogging on the spot. I am sat in a pew, and my heart rate elevates, and my just this heavy sense. And there is one word, ordination.
Did you have to say the word then? Was that the throat thing then? Was it like you were giving birth, like you had to say it?
No. Do you know what? It was like I had to swallow it.
Really?
Yeah.
You had to swallow it so it can become part of who you are. It was the yes or no moment, was it?
Yeah.
Wow.
I had to swallow it.
I'm getting tingles.
I'm sat in my pew with my friend behind me and a friend beside me and one behind me, and I'm looking. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with everyone? Like, why are you sat there? Like, there's this thing. Why are you look like you're just enjoying it. What's wrong with you? And we get called and invited up to take part in communion. And I remember walking up and having to hold the handrail because my legs are wobbling at that moment. It just in the way of adrenaline will make you wobble.
Did George sort of say, what's going on with you? And
oh, he was tucked home in bed with the kids.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, he didn't get to
Missed
play.
that bit.
He didn't get to play. So I said the communion, and I'm like, that's lovely, that's great. Going, what are you doing? And sit back down, and I drop my friend home afterwards, and we go home.
Safe to drive.
Safe to drive. I'd calmed down by that point. And George said to me, nice service.
Stand by. Sit down.
I know you probably want to go to sleep, but I think God wants me to be a priest. And he kind of went,
God calling.
Yeah, bing. And he kind of went, oh, all right. Because
That's the kind of response you want in a sense, isn't it?
It's okay.
Green light.
Yeah, all right, that's great. You don't object.
Yeah.
And I had been reading, very big fan of Reverend Richard Coles, very big fan. And I had been reading his autobiography that year.
Uh-huh.
And I suddenly remembered there was a moment in there where he'd had this kind of strange warming of the heart, almost, as we might say. And he refers to it in his book. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I need to find this. I need to know I'm not mad, that I'm not the only person to ever experience something like this. And I'm ferreting under the bed trying to find the biography, pulling it out and checking for the pages. And I just kept reading it and rereading it and reading it and thinking, no, it's real. He really has called.
Wow. So what happened then? I mean, the next day.
Yeah.
Did you go and see the priest? Did you go and see who? What happened?
It took about 6 weeks for me to really tell anybody. It really did. And it got to the point, I spoke to the curate's wife one Wednesday morning at midweek Eucharist. And she said, "You okay?" And I'm like, "No, not really." And I got to the point where my brain, it felt like it was itching. I was physically, because I was just saying, no. I was physically saying no. It was like God had said, "Okay, I'm going to make you do this one way or another." And the minute I said to her, I felt that kind of feeling subside. And I said, "I think I'm being called."
What did she say?
She said, "I saw your body language change that night."
Wow.
She was sat behind me.
She literally saw something, your body language, your I want to say the word aura, I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that, but there's something
like
about
posture,
your posture.
Yeah, and she said, "I almost tapped you on the shoulder to see if you were okay."
Golly.
And I said, "No, I wasn't okay."
It's like Samuel being called, isn't it?
It's just idiots.
Hear it again. Just say, "Yes, Lord, your servant is here."
I am here, it's me.
So then that started the discernment process?
Yeah,
within
so
the CV?
I had a meeting with John and said, "I've got this really weird story. Like this cannot be real. And he said, "Tell me." He was really good. He said, "Just tell me." So I did. And he just smiled at me and he said, "Welcome." And that was it. From there, we started the discernment process in the diocese, and lots of vocation meetings and things. I went to the first vocation meeting with the advisor, just thinking, no, you're not getting this, because he was like, "You're obviously called to some vocation." I'm like, "No, I'm called to ordination." Like, seriously, God gave me one word. And then,
there's no discussion here.
Maybe you feel like you should be a licensed lay minister. No.
Hello.
One word. And it was great. And the diocesan director of Ordinance, the DDO, picked me up from that point, and we started the process. And
wow.
We went through various interviews and essay writing and all of those things. And all the way along, there would be little God-filled moments.
Yeah.
There were moments of feeling that I wasn't on this path and having bad times at church. And then one night I went to another church and experienced just such a different expression of Anglican worship.
Right.
On that breadth that we have, that just sang to my soul.
Wonderful. And
somebody said to me, "Oh, what are you doing here tonight?" And I said, "The Holy Spirit sent me," because that's what had happened. And every time there would just be this little encouragement or nudge, and it would just go. And even to the point of not even knowing how I would train. I'm a mum with 2 kids. I've been self-employed for 10 years. We couldn't uproot to a residential college. It would have to be part-time. I'd been studying part-time. It wasn't a great mix for us as a family. And then, do you know what? Suddenly someone decided to open a full-time non-residential college on my doorstep. And I remember Jill Duff, now Bishop Jill, obviously, she came down to give a presentation.
Jill.
Amazing Jill. She came to give this presentation. And I was like, who is St. Mellitus? I'd never heard the name. And I was like, that's lovely. And she sat and talked to me and to another ordinand, Nikki. And she was explaining that this college was opening and it would be on my doorstep. And I would train part-time in placement and part-time in at the college. And I was just like, wow, I could do this. And I can drop the kids to school. And I can...
There's a door opening.
It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I remember very early on, it must have been the January time, filling my online application to St. Mellitus. I didn't even have a date for BAP. I was like, no, I need to fill in this form. Jill said I need to fill in the form. Filled in the form. Got given, an offer letter, and then went off to my selection in the June. And just, that letter in my pocket just made me feel like a validation.
And actually, how did it feel when you got through your bishop's advisory panel? What was it? An email, phone call, letter?
Yeah. So I'd had an amazing panel. The 3 days I had spent in Ely, I was on fire.
Woo!
Internally. I was just like, this is amazing! I love this! And I came back and I remember saying to Simon, who'd seen me through the process in the Truro Diocese, I'd said to Simon, if I haven't been successful and I haven't been recommended for training, I will happily go back again to that panel.
Right.
Because I had had such an amazing time. It was a God moment all the way through. He gave me the words to say at every moment. It helped that Jill Duff was praying and sending me scripture.
Amazing Jill Duff.
Amazing.
Amazing Jill Duff.
And she said to me...
What she prays about happens.
It does.
Hotline to God.
She totally is. And she had said, she gave me this piece of advice and I held it all the way through. And I still do actually. She said, be fully yourself at full volume.
I said that to her.
Aha, well there you go.
You watch him.
It's good advice.
Yeah, in relation to her being a bishop. It's calling you as you are.
Yeah, and totally see that. So when the call came through, I was working that day and I had already said to the bishop's office, I won't be available till after 6 o'clock because I thought I can't go through the agony of not being able to answer my phone. And so I get home and nobody's home. The house is empty. 8 minutes past 6. Thank you, Bishop Tim. You were very prompt. It didn't keep me waiting. And he said, hello, Laura. It's Bishop Tim. I was like, nervous giggle. Hello.
Tell me!
And he said, how are you?
Who cares?
I said, like a cat on a hot tin roof. And he said, oh, I can't imagine why. And then he just started the next sentence with, I'm delighted to tell you.
Wow.
And at that point, I just,
microphone moment.
Totally, boom.
Yeah.
What another wobbly leg moment, to be fair.
I'm sure.
Absolutely. And I just, George and the children arrived home in the middle of the phone call. And George is trying to look at me to gauge what's happening. And I'm trying to put my thumbs up, but also trying not to cry because this is like a huge moment. And they come in and I get off the phone and George just gives me a big hug and then produces a present that he'd already bought because he was so certain of the outcome.
What a guy.
Yeah.
What a guy.
Yeah.
So what would you say to any other person out there, in particular women, who feel a stirring inside their heart, that inner voice, to explore a similar journey? What would you say to them?
Be obedient.
In a nutshell, be obedient. Wow, that really hit me. That really did.
Yeah.
And you're now, how many years in training?
So I am at the halfway point, so 18 months, another 18 months-ish to go.
Okay. And you hope to stay in the southwest?
Absolutely. I hope to stay in the Diocese of Truro.
Okay,
absolutely,
cool.
Yeah.
We'll get on to some theological questions in a minute, if that's okay.
I may let myself down at that point.
You've clearly got a prophetic gift. You've got a gift for being able to listen to God, the naturally supernatural side of being a Christian. Maybe it's a bit unfair to sort of throw this on you because you need to sort of think this through, but I kind of almost want to say, how does that work? Is that something we can all do? And if so, how? What does it feel like? I've had it two times in my life, and it's never been sort of like, a big sort of like, siren sounding or anything like that. But in some sense, it is a big siren, but I would describe it as God's still small voice that didn't feel like my thought. It felt like a thought that had been inspired in my mind, and it didn't feel like mine. It felt like a thought with God's signature on it, and like, this is what this is all about. So that's kind of what it feels to me. It's like God's in your mind. It's almost like telepathy, but not. It's more than that. It's a higher form of communication. Nothing audible, but it's a higher form of communication that goes in there.
Yeah, I would agree. I think my experience is quite similar, and I would say that I think everybody experiences something different. So for some people it might be a picture or a vision. That never has been for me. I think God knows me so well that he knows that I need a massive kick to recognise anything. He literally needs to say, you! And that's for me, so I think he responds to us each in an appropriate way for us.
Oh, okay, cool.
I think that's what I would say. So I'd say to anyone who's looking for signs or whatever it could be for them, that they just need to be in tune with it and don't dismiss it. It's so easy to think, particularly with the thoughts that you and I get, is to think we've thought that and not to recognise who placed that thought there. And I'm only now just being brave enough to share those with people when I get them for them. I sometimes I'll get a word and I think, oh, that's for so and so. I can't tell them that. I sound like a right idiot. I can't tell. And I'm just starting to be brave enough to go, no, actually, I think this is for you.
Perhaps it's a gift that needs to be practiced.
Yes. Yeah. It's like a muscle. It needs to be exercised.
I agree.
Yeah.
So with all this in mind as well, what would you say to anyone who is perhaps watching this and thinking about the existence of God? Is God real? Is God not? I don't know why, but in my mind, because I love science, and I get frustrated by people who are scientific, sort of saying, well, God doesn't exist, that sort of thing, and because the faith side of things is of a certain sort of tapestry, and the science side of things is of a certain tapestry, and I get frustrated by that. But to me, they're cousins. To me, they're totally interlinked. They really are. When I'm looking at science and so forth, I'm looking at how God created the world. Because to me, Genesis 1-11 is a picture story. So what would you say to anyone now who is sat watching this and is listening to your story and would love to experience something similar?
I mean, just to pick on the science question for a second, having trained as a veterinary nurse and spending lots of time kind of looking at how creation's made and how we fix it when it's poorly, I would just say, and it's a very flippant reply, but there is truth for me in what I'm saying, is who do you think created the scientists?
Yeah.
I always think that, people say, oh, it's science. Well, where do you think that came from? That for me, that is God. And the weird thing in all of this is that I've never doubted that all my life.
Right.
I've never kind of thought any of this is a man-made construct or just something that has developed without a greater being in charge. And I think that's, for me, really important, is that it has always been there. And yes, I've questioned it. Of course I've questioned it. And things like Dad dying when I was 18, that makes you question a lot of things. But I never questioned that God existed or was in charge.
At the beginning of this year, so moving on to the theological, unless there's something else you would really love to say about your God story?
I think I've probably said a lot.
It's
You're going to have to edit a lot of that.
No, I'm not. It's going straight in there. It is.
Nobody will want to watch all of that.
Come on. They'll be glued. This is 2019 now, as we're in my studio recording this. At the beginning of the year, I had a God moment where I felt God put a question in my mind to chew over, and I felt like he was asking me to do it throughout the entire year. To chew this one over in conversation, in prayer, with great reason and other such stuff. On the cross, when Jesus died, and then on the very first Easter, as we call it, morning, the whole world changed. And some parts of the world are still in a journey towards discovering that everything changed, but it certainly changed. And from that, the notion of resurrection hope sprang into being. And if you like, a new humanity was born, a new way of living was born, a new way of being in relationship with God was allowed, no barriers. So the question I feel God has asked me, and I'm doing it with great excitement, and also in quite a relaxed way, because I think better in that fashion, is what is resurrection hope? What does a life look like with resurrection hope? What does that look like? And I mean, feel free to say, of course, anything you like. But I had a discussion with some of your fellow students at St. Mellitus, and we honed in on, well, if we do live lives of resurrection hope, where literally death, in an eternal sense, has been defeated, and intimacy with God is not just possible, it's what He wants, and other such things. Why do we worry about half of the things we worry about? What should we worry about, and what should we not worry about? Why do we concern ourselves with that when actually, the values of the kingdom are that? What does a resurrection life look like?
It's an interesting thing, and I think for 2019, I think resurrection hope is going to be a buzz phrase. I think we're going to hear this a lot this year. Maybe Brexit is driving some of that. Maybe we're looking for hope, and something to hold on to. Maybe there's something about Brexit and new life that people are really holding on to, because it's definitely a phrase that keeps coming back this year.
Okay.
And these things do, don't they? On occasion they resurrect and carry on. For me, I've heard lots of different explanations of what that means to people, and certainly one of the key themes is that eternal life. When He rose again that morning, the world did change. We knew that there was something after this.
Yeah.
That's what He came to show us. He said, this has changed. This is different.
Hundreds of people saw Him.
Yeah, this wasn't one person. This wasn't a bad curry the night before.
It's quite a curry.
This was, there were no hallucinations here. And I totally believe that. I totally believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. What I haven't heard a lot of is the responsibility that comes with that.
Right.
Because if there is eternal life, that means that we can't just do what we want now, and just so it doesn't matter if we destroy the planet. It doesn't matter if we hurt people. It doesn't matter if we just live our lives to our pleasure. We have responsibility, because eternal life means there is something after this, and what you do now is going to be reflected.
So it's not like a platonic escapism. It really is. It matters now.
Yeah, it matters absolutely now as much as it will do in the future, and I think that responsibility thing is huge, and perhaps that's part of Christian life, is accepting that responsibility. As much as we accept Jesus and the hope that He gives us in the resurrection, the eternal life, we have to accept the flip side to that.
Yeah.
This is not a one-sided deal.
So what's the job description of the church within all of this?
Communication.
You said be witnesses, didn't you? Yeah,
it is.
It. Boom, done.
Yeah, it is. For me, and
communication, love it.
And in the age we live in, I'm really keen on digital discipleship.
Yeah.
And I love Twitter. You've seen that. I love Twitter.
Check out Laura's Twitter feed. Got thousands of followers.
But I love the engagement that happens there, and the prayer that happens there, and the education that happens there. And that's not just amongst Christians. You see other people interacting with that. You see it on the church Facebook page. Just by putting it out there and sharing it with the local village, people are getting the message. And we're heading for Easter. And what better time to be really shouting this message? And I think, communication. And we just have to do that in the modern age.
Interconnected, very similar. What would you say are the biggest challenges the church is or are facing now?
I think the Church of England in particular is held down by its buildings.
Right.
I see that. I mean, a rural placement, 7 churches, 2 chapels, ancient buildings that are swallowing money, which means that money can't be used for mission.
Right.
And what happens is in the village you become known for needing money.
Oh gosh, right, yeah.
Because we need to raise this many thousands of pounds, or and sometimes that happens. I picked up another church newsletter the other day, not one of ours, but another one, and all it told me was how much they'd raised that year.
Oh, right.
And I think that is our challenge. I think our mission has been completely obliterated by the need to maintain the buildings.
So with that very insightful comment, fun one now. Click your fingers, 7 years' time, lots of experience under your belt. Okay, curacy done, first job, all the rest of it. What would be, right, because I imagine it would change, what would be your ideal job in the CV?
First of all...
Name it, pictures watching, name it.
First of all, I absolutely love your confidence they are going to ordain me. because I'm still only recommended for training, not for ordination. If it happens, 7 years' time, 10 years' time, what I would love to do is use some of my old skills and my new skills. And I think some of that will be, I hope, enabling others within a team. Enabling other clergy and enabling other teams to do it. I hope God, the gifts that I've given, I'm hoping that God will show me a way to share them.
So you're an encourager, you're an enabler.
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay.
I hope so.
Just want to sort of say, I suspect also at some stage you might be ordaining other people as well. Let the reader understand.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you want to cover?
If they drag this interview out then.
Anything else you want to cover?
No, God, we've done so much.
I know. Are we still on?
Have we still got battery?
Please stay off. I'm playing your recorder. So, can we finish? I don't know what to call this. I want to call this something, but at the moment it's just like fun, quick fire questions. That's all I can think of, and I'm doing it as self-indulgent because I find them fun, and I always like doing it. I also think it says quite a lot about the person.
Yeah, we also need fun, right?
Absolutely. So here we go.
Go on.
Strangest prayer answered.
Oh, gosh. Well, apart from getting me through my back, that was a very strange prayer. This is a very strange. I genuinely don't know. I think sometimes the small requests are the ones that take you by surprise.
Parking space.
Yeah, a parking space. Or last night I was waiting up all night with a relative who was in hospital, and I just put a little tweet out saying, anyone up praying, just pray, I've had a long day and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, would love it for some kind of sustaining prayer. And 10 minutes later, a nurse offered me a cup of tea. Now, in the Church of England, that's sustaining.
I can actually thank Laura, who's sort of on air, whatever the word you use, because she really was up all night, bless her, looking after her family, so it's quite a miracle she's here.
Not at all.
The thing you can't live without. Stop looking at my questions.
That's coming next. What can't I live without? My family.
Okay.
They sustain me, they keep me going, they give me purpose, they keep me accountable.
Film star crush when you're a teenager?
Oh my goodness, Hugh Grant.
Oh really?
Oh, 4 weddings and a funeral.
Why am I being surprised? I don't know why I'm being surprised.
It was the floppy hair and the accent. It did it every time.
Guilty pleasure?
Too much chocolate.
So with you on that one.
Yeah.
If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
To make things tidy.
Oh right. Or just like picky fingers of the tidy.
Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
So I'm a tidy person as well, and I live with someone who's not. So yeah, I think I'm.
Well, you see, this is the problem: is I'm not tidy, so I would like the superpower to make me tidy.
Gotcha. Oh, right. Okay. So personally, craziest thing you've ever done?
Train to become a priest.
Most embarrassing moment? Watch this be recorded, and you want to be ordained. Maybe I should have asked that.
I am very good at kind of getting the wrong end of the stick in terms of somebody rings up, and I think so. I remember when I've been quite young. Somebody rang for my dad, and I thought it was my uncle being stupid. It was actually my dad's commanding officer.
Oh wow!
And I'm going, don't be silly.
This is a classic one. Desert island. 3 things you can take.
Oh. Books, and more books.
Oh really?
Yeah.
You're a real bookworm.
Yeah, fiction, fluffy, nothing too heavy, and the occasional kind of self-improving one. Currently really enjoying Sheryl Sandberg's Option B.
Oh, good recommendation.
Definitely.
No chocolate?
No, actually.
Probably just melt on it.
Yeah, I was thinking that, like, the book's more practical, right?
Okay,
and it's more practical than my Kindle, so I'll go with book.
If you had a time machine, which era?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. Part of me would quite like to go back and experience some of the things that happened in World War II.
Oh right, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Rock and roll. Favourite cereal?
Oh,
I think this is really important.
This is quite a key question, isn't it? I'm dating.
Favourite cereal?
I'll be honest, Shreddies.
Really?
Yeah.
Actually, I have to have lots of sugar on Shreddies.
Yeah, that is true. And I have to do that when the kids aren't watching.
Favourite song?
Favourite song, as in pop song.
Any?
Amazed by Lone Star.
Cool. Dark chocolate or milk chocolate?
Dark.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you reverse park?
I just did in your driveway.
Name the thing you absolutely can't share.
Well, I can't share it, so I can't name it.
Very good. I'm thinking chocolate then. No, it's mine. Told you. Very good. Very good. Oh, here we go. We're coming into lane.
Okay, all right.
When you meet Jesus face to face, what's the first thing you'd like him to say to you?
Welcome.
When you meet Jesus face to face, what's the thing you actually think he's going to say to you?
Are you kidding me?
When you meet Jesus face to face, what's the first thing you'd like to ask him?
When he said, love one another, was it really as simple as that?
Wow. When you're in heaven, who are the top 5 biblical characters you'd like to meet first?
Oh my goodness, Chris.
We really are coming into land, I promise you.
I think there are. Gosh, that's just so complex, isn't it? At the moment, I'm doing quite a lot on Romans. I'd quite like to meet Phoebe, actually.
Oh, right.
Find out what her story was. You know,
how interesting.
You know, as a deacon being sent to Rome, what was going on for her as a woman in that time. You know, all of that kind of stuff. So definitely, quite like to meet Judas, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think if we're all honest, some of us have some sympathy there.
Yeah.
So definitely he's got to be in that list. You know, and I think Ruth, anyone who can cope with a mother-in-law, she's got to be on my list right there. You know, and for that matter, probably Eve as well. What was going on for her? It's very easy to blame a woman in our society. So you know, why is she still seen as the one who took the apple? Well, she did take the apple, but why is she still blamed for it? So I think that's there. And actually, if I'm going back to the Old Testament, I'd also quite like to meet Noah.
Oh, right. Yeah, cool.
Like that is like a massive, like, you know, why are you building a boat?
Yeah.
Nobody else is building a boat. What? Like, how did
Maybe he got a really heavy weight thing in his throat and he had to swallow it.
Exactly, you know. Where's the word ark? That's what I want to know, you know. Yeah, I mean, the strength of mind that took to go against society, to keep doing what he did.
You're in heaven. Who's the first family member you'd like to meet?
My dad.
Oh, bless.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much of my life that he's not been here for.
Right.
I've now been without him longer than I had him in terms of physically, and yeah, I just catch up. Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Laurie, you've been amazing. Can't thank you enough for being my first interview. I always thought I had this strong feeling and sense that you should be the first interviewee, and you've set this off wonderfully well. You really have. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for.
May bite me.
And everyone else watching as well. Nothing's going to go out that Laura doesn't want to go out. So whatever you're watching has been, if you like, you know, proof watched by you and approved. All that sort of GPR stuff, and that's what it's all about. Fun thing, how should we sign off? You know, we were laughing and joking about this. Yeah, like, it's good night for me. It's good night. I mean, what do we do?
I don't know.
I want firstly that invitation to sort of like watch this on YouTube. I think I need to do that. Can you subscribe thing, tell others about it, that sort of stuff.
That's a good tip. Yeah.
So please do that.
Perhaps you need like a link along the bottom.
Link along the bottom. If I can know how to do that, I'll do that. How do we sign off?
I don't know. Do we pray for people?
Should we do that?
We could do that.
Do
you think we should do that?
Let's do that.
Lord, thank you for our conversation, for being present here, for your Spirit descending upon us, for the lightness with which we were able to hold this conversation. And Lord, just please bless Chris in this new phase of his ministry as he takes this forward and helps others tell their God story, so that others may be emboldened to tell theirs to someone else and the communication chain continues. And Lord, can you please bless our viewers who have sat through this, and I hope that they have found some nugget of information or something that has encouraged them into obedience to you. In your name, Amen.
Amen. Thanks for watching.
High five!
I know that in the future there's going to be some really snazzy way of ending it.